My name is Noah Carter. I'm 25 and I work in marketing. I learned early that the easiest way to move through days was to keep them narrow. Wake up at the same time. Shower with the water set just warm enough not to think about it. Coffee from the same chipped mug I'd had since college. I left my apartment at 8:12 every morning, not because it mattered, but because it kept the morning from expanding into something messy. The building was old in a way that tried not to show it. Beige paint layered over beige paint. Always that. Smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. The elevator worked most days, and on the days it didn't, the stairs were narrow and quiet, the kind that made you aware of your own breathing. I liked that. Nobody talked in the stairwell. It was understood. I lived on the third floor. End unit. Fewer shared walls. Less noise. The apartment itself was clean without being careful. Couch. Small table by the window. A plant I remembered. To water just often enough to keep it alive. Nothing on the walls except a calendar. I never changed because I used my phone for dates anyway. Work was predictable in the way that makes time pass without asking questions. Emails, texts, meetings that ended with the same phrases they started with. I was good at it. Not in a way that drew attention, but in a way that meant people trusted me not to make things worse. That was usually enough. In the evenings, I stopped. At the same grocery store, bought the same few things, went home. I cooked simple meals and ate them standing up sometimes. Plate in one hand, phone in the other, scrolling without really reading. When I sat, it felt like a choice I hadn't planned for. I didn't know my neighbors. I recognized them the way you recognize furniture in a room you pass through every day. Shapes, movements. A woman with a loud laugh on the second floor. A man who smelled like cigarette smoke even when he wasn't smoking. That was the extent of it. Clara entered my life because of a package. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays always felt longer than they needed to. I came home to find a small brown box outside my door, my name printed in black letters that weren't quite straight. I picked it up, felt the weight. Too light to be anything important. When I looked closer, I saw the apartment number was wrong by 1 digit. I stood there longer than necessary, holding it. Most days, I would have set it by the mailboxes and gone inside. Let someone else deal with it. But the name was handwritten, in marker on the side, and something about that made it harder to ignore. Apartment 3B. I walked down the hall and knocked. It took a moment. I heard movement inside, footsteps unhurried. The door opened halfway, and Clara looked at me like she'd already been expecting the interruption. Even if she hadn't known it would be me. She was wearing a sweater that had seen better years, and socks that didn't match. Her hair was pulled back loosely, not styled so much as contained. She didn't smile right away. She waited. This came to my door, I said, holding out the box. She glanced at it, then at me. Thanks. I handed it over. Our fingers brushed briefly, and then didn't. She took the package like it was an ordinary thing, which it was. Sorry. She said, the delivery guy keeps mixing us up. It's fine. There was a pause, not awkward. Just there. I'm Clara, she said finally. Noah. Thanks again. She closed the door gently, not in a hurry. I went back to my apartment and made dinner, pasta, sauce from a jar. I ate it at the counter, standing like usual. But the quiet felt slightly altered, like a room after someone turns off a radio you hadn't realized was on. After that, I started noticing her in ways I hadn't noticed anyone in the building before. Her door opened around the same time mine. Did most mornings, though not always. Sometimes she left earlier, sometimes later. When we crossed paths, she nodded. Once, she held the elevator door when she saw me coming, her foot braced against it without looking back to check if I was actually hurrying. She carried her groceries without bags, arms full, balanced like she'd practiced it. When she dropped something, she picked it up without comment and kept going. She wore headphones sometimes, but never when she was on the phone. I noticed that her porch light stayed on later than most. I noticed that she watered the plant outside her door every few days, even when it rained. I noticed that she didn't check her phone while she waited for the elevator. None of it meant anything. It just accumulated. One evening the elevator broke again. A handwritten sign was taped to the door, corners curling. I sighed and turned toward the stairs. Clara was already there, one hand on the railing. Guess it's leg day, she said. Guess so. We walked down together. 3 flights. The sound of our steps echoed differently when there were 2 of us. At the bottom, she stopped and tied her shoe, quick and practiced. You want this? She asked, holding out the sign she'd pulled off the elevator door. No, I'm good. She shrugged and tucked it under her arm. Maintenance won't come unless someone calls. You calling? Already did. Okay. Another pause. Then she pushed the front door open and let me go first. It wasn't much. But later that night, I realized I'd sat down to eat without thinking about it. The building lost power a week later. Not long. Maybe an hour. Long enough for the lights to go out mid-email and the hum of appliances to stop, leaving a quiet that felt intentional. I stood by the window, watching other buildings flicker back to life one by one. There was a knock. I opened the door to find Clara holding a flashlight. I have candles if you need one. She said, I'm okay. She nodded. If it lasts longer, I'm in 3B. Okay. She turned to leave, then stopped. Actually, my stove's gas. I was about to make soup. If you want some. It was an offer that didn't ask for anything beyond itself. Sure, I said, surprising myself. Her apartment was warmer than mine, not in temperature but in use. Shoes by the door. A table with scratches that looked earned. The soup simmered while we stood quietly, each doing our own small tasks. I washed my hands. She chopped bread. We ate at the table. No music, no small talk beyond what was necessary. Power usually comes back fast, she said. It already feels longer. She nodded like that made sense. When the lights flickered, neither of us moved right away. Then she stood, poured the remaining soup into a container, and handed it to me. For later, she said. Thanks. I went home and put the container in my fridge. It stayed there for 2 days before I ate it, not because I was saving it. I just kept opening the fridge, seeing it, and closing the door again. By the end of the week, Clara's presence had settled into my routines without disrupting them. Or maybe it had shifted them in ways I didn't have language for yet. I found myself slowing down in the hallway, leaving my door unlocked for an extra minute, checking the porch light across the hall without knowing why. Nothing had happened. That was the point. On Sunday morning, I woke later than usual. Sunlight cut across the floor at an angle I didn't see often. I made coffee and stood by the window, mug warming my hands. Across the way, Clara was on her balcony, reading. She looked up, saw me, lifted her mug slightly in acknowledgement, then went back to the page. I didn't wave. I just stood there until my coffee cooled enough to drink. That afternoon, I reorganized a drawer I hadn't touched in months, threw out old receipts, untangled cords. When I finished, the drawer closed smoothly, like it was meant to. In the evening, I took the trash out earlier than usual. Clara was in the hallway, adjusting the plant by her door. Looks better, she said, stepping back. It does. She wiped her hands on her jeans. I'm heading out tomorrow. Couple days. Oh. She nodded. If anything comes for me, you can just leave it. Okay. She paused, then smiled, small and brief. I'll be back. I watched her walk down the stairs, keys in hand, step steady. When her door stayed closed the next morning, the hallway felt wider than before. I went to work. I did my job. I came home. The porch light across from mine stayed off. That night, I left mine on a little longer than usual. Clara came back on a Thursday evening, 2 days later than she'd said. I knew because I'd stopped noticing the porch light being off sometime Wednesday night and then noticed it again when it was on. The building had a way of teaching you its rhythms without asking permission. I was unlocking my door when I heard her keys behind me. Hey, she said. Hey. She sounded the same, not tired, not excited, just present. I stepped aside without thinking so she could get to her door. She paused, juggling her bag, then set it down to unlock. Everything okay while I was gone? She asked. Yeah. She nodded. Good. That was it. She picked up her bag and went inside. No explanation for the extra day, no apology. The light across the hall stayed on late that night, then went off at the hour I'd come to expect. The next week rearranged. Itself slowly. It started raining on Monday and didn't really stop. Not heavy rain. The kind that never commits. Just enough to dampen everything and make the sidewalk slick. I walked home with my jacket zipped higher than usual, shoes damp. By the time I reached the building, the elevator was out again. I stood at the bottom of the stairs longer than I needed to, staring up like the steps had personally offended me. You want to wait it out? Clara asked from behind me. I turned. She was holding an umbrella, dripping onto the floor. Does it ever get fixed faster if you wait? No, she said. But sometimes it feels good to pretend. We climbed together. Halfway up the second flight, she slowed, adjusting the strap of her bag. I stopped at the store, she said. Got more than I meant to. I nodded. My hands were empty. I felt vaguely derprepared at her door. She unlocked it, then stepped aside. You can grab something if you want. I've got soup going again. Okay. It wasn't an invitation. Wrapped in politeness, it was just a statement. I went in. Her apartment looked the same as before, only more so. A jacket draped over a chair, mail stacked in a deliberate pile. The soup smelled like something that had taken its time. We didn't talk much. She handed me a towel when I took my shoes off. I dried my hair at the sink, watching my reflection look slightly out of place in a space. We ate. The rain tapped against the windows in a steady pattern. At some point, the conversation drifted toward work, not in detail, just enough to place. The hours we spent elsewhere. Went on a date last night, I said, without planning to. Clara looked up from her bowl. Didn't freeze. Didn't react the way people usually do when they're deciding what to say. Oh, she said. Yeah, someone from work. She nodded once, then took another bite. The silence stretched. It didn't feel heavy. It felt intentional. She never love you like I do, Clara said. It landed softly. No emphasis, no challenge. I waited for her to smile. She didn't. She set her spoon down and stood, carrying her bowl to the sink. The rain kept tapping. I didn't respond. Not because I was offended, not because I was confused. I just didn't know where the sentence wanted to go. She didn't look back at me. She rinsed her bowl, dried it, put it away. Then she turned, leaned against the counter. You want more? She asked. No, I'm good. She nodded like that was the expected answer. I went home 10 minutes later. In my apartment, the air felt thinner. I sat on the couch without turning on the lights and tried to reconstruct the tone of her voice. There was no drama in it. No request. Just information. At work the next day, I opened the same email 3 times and didn't read it. At lunch, I ate at my desk even though I'd been trying not to. I typed out a message to the woman from work, then deleted it before sending. That evening, I didn't see Clara. Her porch light was on. I left mine off. The days that followed didn't clarify anything. If anything, they made it quieter. Clara didn't avoid me. She didn't seek me out. We crossed paths in the hallway, exchanged nods. Once, she held the door again, her foot braced without looking back. Another time, she passed me on the stairs and said, careful. When she saw me glance at my phone, nothing about her behavior changed enough to comment on. That was the problem. I stopped mentioning the date. I didn't go on another one. Not because I decided anything. I just didn't feel like adding noise. On Saturday, the rain finally stopped. The sky stayed gray, but the air felt lighter. I took my laundry downstairs, realized too late I'd forgotten detergent, and stood there weighing whether to go back up. Clara appeared with a small bottle in her hand. Here, she said, setting it on the machine. Thanks. She leaned against the wall while the washer filled. We stood there listening to the water rush in. You reorganized drawers, she said. I looked at her. What? When you're restless, she said. I can hear it sometimes, opening and closing. I didn't know how to respond to that. She didn't elaborate. When the washer started, she pushed off the wall. "I'll be upstairs." I watched her go, detergent in hand. I folded my laundry later with more care than usual, lining the socks up, smoothing wrinkles that would return. Anyway, that night, I cooked something that took longer than usual. Chopped vegetables carefully. Let things simmer. I ate at the table, lights on, window open. The hallway was quiet. Her porch light went off at the usual time. On Sunday morning, I woke early, not alarm early, just early enough to notice it. I made coffee and sat on the floor by the window, back against the couch. Across the way, Clara's balcony was empty. I waited. Later that afternoon, I heard a knock. I opened the door to find her holding a small bag. "I made bread," she said. "Too much." "Okay," she handed it over. Our fingers brushed again, briefly. This time, neither of us moved away immediately. It wasn't charged, just acknowledged. "I'm heading out," she said. "Walk. Enjoy." She nodded, then hesitated. "You coming?" I thought about my couch, the drawer I'd finished organizing, the quiet that waited. "Yeah," I said. We walked without destination, side by side. Sometimes she talked. Sometimes she didn't. She pointed out a crack in the sidewalk she'd tripped over once. A cafe that closed too early. A house with a porch light that stayed on all night. At one point, she slowed, adjusting her pace to match mine. Or maybe I adjusted to hers. It was hard to tell. When we parted, it was without ceremony. She turned toward her building. I kept going. Another block before turning back. That night I left my porch light on, not out of habit, just because I wanted to see it from across the hall. By the end of the week, my routines were still intact, but they bent more easily. I ate later, walked slower, let silence sit without filling it. Clara didn't say the sentence again. She didn't need to. The trust between us didn't announce itself. It showed up in small ways. In how she left her door unlocked when she took the trash out. In how I picked up her mail without being asked. In how neither of us tried to define what was happening. The building felt warmer. Or maybe I was just paying attention. One evening, as I turned off the lights, I noticed both porch lights were still on. I stood there for a moment, then left mine that way. It felt like choosing to stay without promising anything. Clara started leaving earlier in the mornings, not abruptly. Not enough that I could point to a single day and say something had changed. Just early enough that our paths stopped crossing the way they had. The hallway stayed empty when I stepped out at 8:12. Her porch light was off more often. The plant by her door looked watered, but I never saw her do it. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that routines shift, that people adjust. Still, I found myself standing in my doorway an extra second before locking it, listening for sounds. That didn't come. Work filled the hours the way it always had. Meetings, deadlines, the same coffee mug. But I caught myself checking the time more often. Not because I needed to be somewhere, but because I was aware of not being somewhere else. One evening, I came home to find a note taped to my door. Went out of town for a couple days. Back Sunday. Clara, no explanation, no apology. The handwriting was the same neat, slightly slanted print she'd used on the elevator sign weeks ago. I left the note there longer than necessary before taking it down. The building settled into a quieter version of itself. Without Clara's presence, the hallways felt like they had when I first moved in, neutral, transitional. I cooked less. Ate standing up again. Let the plant in my apartment dry out more than it should have. On Saturday, I reorganized a drawer. I'd already reorganized. There was nothing left to throw away. Sunday came, gray and unremarkable. I went for a walk without a route, ended up circling the same few blocks twice. When I returned, her porch light was on. She was unlocking her door when I reached the third floor. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She looked tired, not visibly. Just in the way, her movements seemed slightly more deliberate, like she was conserving something. "How was the trip?" I asked. "Fine." She set her bag down, unlocked the door, then picked it up again. "I made soup," she said, almost as an afterthought. "If you want, I do." Inside, nothing had changed. Or maybe I just noticed the same things differently. The scratches on the table, the jacket on the chair. She moved around the kitchen with the familiarity of someone who didn't need to think about where things were. We ate quietly. At some point, she stood and opened the window, letting in cool air. You okay? She asked, not looking at me. Double quotes, yes, I said. Then after a moment, are you? She nodded once. Yeah. The answer felt complete. Not reassuring, not evasive. Just sufficient. After dinner, I didn't leave right away. Neither did she. Suggest that I should. We sat at opposite ends of the table, not talking. The kind of silence that isn't waiting to be filled. I'm going to start leaving earlier, she said eventually. Work thing. Okay. She looked at me then, not searching. Just checking. I realized standing there that I had been letting things happen to me for most of my life. Not in a dramatic way. In small, reasonable ways. Letting routines decide. Letting proximity substitute for choice. I can adjust, I said. She didn't respond immediately. She gathered the bowls, set them in the sink. You don't have to, she said. I know. The words sat between us, not heavy. Just present, over. The next week, I did adjust. Not to her schedule exactly. To mine. I left work earlier one afternoon, walked home instead of taking the bus. The air was sharp with the coming cold. I bought groceries I didn't usually buy. Things that took time to prepare. I could put the windows open, letting the smells drift into the hallway. There was a knock. Clara stood there, hands in her pockets. It smells good, she said. You hungry? She shrugged. I could be. We ate together, standing this time, leaning against the counter. It felt different from the soup nights, less provisional. Like something we'd chosen rather than fallen into. I'm thinking about moving, she said casually. Where? Not far, just different. The words landed with more weight than she'd given them. When? I asked, not sure. I nodded. I didn't ask why. She didn't explain. That night, after she left, I stood in my apartment and tried to imagine. The hallway without her, the plant gone, the porch light dark. The quiet returning to its earlier shape. The image didn't hurt. It clarified. The next morning, I changed my schedule. Not by much, just enough to be intentional. I told my manager I'd be shifting my hours. He nodded, unconcerned. When I stepped into the hallway at 7:40, Clara's door was open. She was tying her shoes. She looked up, surprised. Hey, she said. Hey. She stood, adjusted her jacket. You leaving early now? She asked. Yes. She nodded slowly. Okay. We walked down the stairs together. At the bottom, she stopped, turned to me. You don't have to do that, she said again. I know. She watched me for a moment longer than usual. Then she opened the door and stepped outside. From then on, we moved through days side by side. Without discussing it, we shared meals when it made sense. Walks when the weather allowed. Silence when words would have complicated things. There were no declarations. No lines drawn. Just consistency. One evening I came home to find her door open and boxes stacked just inside. Need help? I asked. She considered, then nodded. Yeah, we packed slowly. Not everything. Just the things she'd already decided on. Clothes, books, the lamp by her chair. You staying nearby? I asked. Yes. When? Couple weeks. I picked up a box, carried it to my apartment without asking. Set it down carefully. She watched me do it. I wasn't asking, she said. I know. That night she stayed. Not because we said she would. Because neither of us suggested she shouldn't. She slept on the couch. I knew because I heard her breathing in the dark when I passed through the living room. I left a blanket folded nearby. She pulled it over herself without comment. In the morning, we drank coffee standing by the window. The light came in low and pale. I'm not good at promises, she said. I'm not asking for any. She nodded. Good. The boxes stayed in my apartment longer than planned, then longer than that. Eventually, they stopped feeling temporary. On the day she officially moved out of 3B, we stood in the hallway together. Her door closed for the last time. The plant gone. The porch light dark. You ready? I asked. Yes. We walked into my apartment. She set her keys on the table, not ceremoniously, just where they fit. That night we ate quietly. Later, she turned off the porch light without asking me. I noticed, but I didn't turn it back on. In the morning, I woke earlier than my alarm. The apartment felt fuller. Not crowded, occupied. I made coffee. She joined me, hair still sleep mussed, sweater pulled on without care. We stood by the window side by side, watching the street wake up. Nothing was perfect. Nothing was settled. But when she reached for her mug and our arms brushed, neither of us moved away. We stayed. Not because we promised to, because for once we chose to.